My name is Jewel Montgomery Smay. I'm the president and CEO of Montgomery Anesthesia Service. When I went to medical school, I thought I wanted to be a surgeon, and my interest in anesthesiology was not present at all. I knew some anesthesiologists, but I had never really seen what they did. I didn't know how they practiced. I just knew that it was somewhat of a popular profession to go into at the time, but I had no real interest. It wasn't until my fourth year of medical school when I did my anesthesiology rotation after I had gone through third year and realized I had no desire to be a surgeon, or I probably wouldn't do well in a surgery residency. I went to the anesthesiology rotation and it felt like I was coming home. Working with those clinicians, residents, and fellows who were teaching me how to practice anesthesiology felt like a natural fit for me. Taking care of one patient at a time, not having to worry about longitudinal patient care, and doing notes or doing clinics suited the kind of practice that I wanted to have, and used a lot of my natural talents as well. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I grew up in a family, my maternal grandparents migrated here from Jamaica with very little education and wanted to pursue the American dream through entrepreneurship. My father, who was an attorney, after law school, worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office and worked in another law firm, and realized soon after he practiced as an employee that he wanted to run his own business, and taught me that entrepreneurship is the way toward freedom. So I've always known that I wanted to have my own business, but knowing that business management was one of my own skills really didn't happen until I worked in the business operations of anesthesiology when I worked for North Star Anesthesia. The aspects and/or skills that I've acquired as an anesthesiologist that I think are applicable and/or give me a leg up as a business manager are risk management, strategic thinking, oversight of strategy, and crisis management. When I said that medicine is recession-proof, albeit not very stable, I think I was thinking about how one can have work-life balance. There will always be sick people to take care of. There will always be people needing surgery. There will always be a job for a pediatric anesthesiologist, such as myself. But the landscape of medicine has changed so dramatically in the past 15 years that I've been basically in practice, such that patients are getting older and sicker, and we're taking care of a lot more patients with a lot fewer physicians. There is a shortage of physicians nationwide that will continue to increase over the next decade. And what we're doing to compensate for that is increase, while patient care is becoming more acute and the number of patients we are required to take care of as individuals is increasing, we are shrinking as a profession, and we're being replaced in many respects by healthcare extenders that don't necessarily have the same skill sets that we have. And so it becomes a more stressful job and a more labor-intensive job for someone, especially as they get more experience, because the more experienced people have to oversee the healthcare extenders and have less control over what is actually done to the patients. I just read a statistic yesterday about how the majority of medical errors occur during during surgical procedures or around the surgical setting, and this is likely because of those factors that I mentioned before, and it becomes more stressful, more time intensive, and it makes less time for family. And for me, the stability of my family is obviously my priority, my primary priority. And so as I look forward to raising my kids, who are now 5 and 6, I have to really think about how stable this career can be for me as a person raising 2 kids, one of which happens to be special needs. And so I think it's more of a personal thing that I say that medicine's not stable. It's more not stable for someone like me who prioritizes my family now and needs to really think about having more control over my time and the level of stress that I have to bring home. Right now, I support entrepreneurs who are trying to do the same things I'm trying to do, who have the same goals that I have, which are to impact the healthcare delivery for underserved populations or the most vulnerable populations. In terms of my friends and my family, how I support them is really to show up authentically and to try to keep a positive attitude and be a source of positivity and encouragement. Oh, the other thing that I really like to keep space for in my life is having time to allow elderly people to impart their wisdom upon me. I grew up having a very, very tight relationship with my grandmother, who lived till she was 97 years old. And she probably had about a 3rd grade education, and I might be underestimating or overestimating that. But the wisdom that she shared with me during the times that we cooked together or just sang together or prayed together were invaluable to me. And so I also want to give back to the elderly by being able to let them tell their stories and share their wisdom with me. My goals and plans for the future, I guess, my biggest goal is to impact the delivery of healthcare to underserved populations or the most vulnerable populations globally. I plan to do that by sort of trying to use my talents the best way that I can in business and in my practice of anesthesiology. I think corporate board governance is one of my goals, one of my plans. I plan to get certified by the NACD to be an independent board director so that I can serve on corporate boards of life sciences, biotechnology, pharma companies that are impacting the delivery of healthcare globally. I also would like to, at some point, go back into the academy, perhaps get a little bit more specialized training in pediatric anesthesiology, and teach residents again and fellows how to practice. I'd also like to be present and sort of the frame around my growing children, and to sort of pave the way for them to be successful in their own rights. And I also want to have a lot of fun doing that. One of my whimsical goals is to learn how to sail, just so that I can be outside and experience the elements and the wind and learn a skill that can help me to travel. more. Gosh, I have probably other goals, but I think those are the most prominent in my mind at the moment. One notable endeavor outside of work that I embarked upon at about when I turned 40 was to become a CrossFit athlete. And I learned how to do Olympic lifting and functional fitness. And I really got into it because for the first time I was able to really change how strong I was in such a short period of time using those techniques. Unfortunately, a few years ago I had a spinal cord injury which was a freak accident that happened that made it harder for me to lift weights over my head. And so I stopped doing it pretty much completely after that. But it was the most generative fitness endeavor that I've ever tried, and it has such a bad reputation because the competitiveness that it generates within you can cause you to be a little bit more risky in the things that you try to do. And so I think people can get injured a lot more doing CrossFit than, say, other athletic pursuits. But it's one of those things I feel really proud of that I spent almost 10 years doing, and it really changed my outlook of fitness and how strong my body could become, and nutrition and all those other things. So that's one notable endeavor. I used to be a very talented singer, and before I went to college, from the time I was 8 years old, all I did was, in my spare time, was either learn music, play music on piano, violin, or sing in choir. And I actually had a lot of solo opportunities during those years as well. But that was my whole life when I was a kid and an adolescent and a young adult, until I developed nodules on my vocal cords. And it's almost like a part of me died, because, my voice quality started to change fairly dramatically, and I just didn't know why. And then, I saw an ENT surgeon, physician, who evaluated my vocal cords and then saw that I had these nodules that were developed. And for a singer who's a soprano, which is what I was, I didn't, the ability for me to recover my vocal range would be slim to none after surgery even. And so I did a period of voice rest to see if I could actually do just less work with my voice and still have my vocal range intact, and it just didn't work, and so I just had to give it up. When I was 12 years old, I auditioned for the Lyric Opera Children's Chorus in Chicago, and the Chicago Lyric Opera is an incredible institution, and I joined that choir and sang with some of the most famous opera singers in the world. The most notable one, who I met when I was 13, was Placido Domingo, one of the tenors that became famous in the 80s and 90s. And I sang in the opera Othello with him as Othello. And I was being paid for that at 13 till I was about 16, when I developed nodules on my vocal cord. So I had a professional career as an opera singer, and planned on doing that for the rest of my life, until I had to sort of rethink what my life would look like. And as a, even though I did well in school, I didn't necessarily think I would be anything particular because I had this talent. And although my parents probably would have thought I needed to go to college and get a degree in something other than music so that I had something to fall back on, that was really what my passion was. And so I think having that kind of devastation and that kind of loss, or at such a young age, has given me resilience and the ability to really shift and change and grow into different things. When I went to college, I hadn't really learned how to study because things came easy to me in high school. And again, I didn't have really the focus that someone who knew they were going to be a doctor from the time they were 10 or 15 years old might have had. And so I didn't really learn how to study till midway through college. And so by the time I got out, I had not the greatest grades. And so and then I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So I did business for 7 years. I was in pharmaceutical sales. I was in financial service. I did a financial advisor assistantship program at what was then called Prudential Securities, and got my Series 7, learned how to sell securities, learned how to trade stocks and options, but just so that I could get a feel for what I would like. So all of my sort of self-discovery to determine whether or not I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or a financial professional or a business person. All of that happened after college for me. In those 7 years where I was working and sort of trying things out. I also sold pharmaceuticals, and it wasn't until and I had to sort of discover myself later, but I took the time to do that, and then realized what my passion was actually serving, and so that's what made me go into medical school, because I had that kind of background, an aptitude for science and mathematics, and so I think having a loss, and a profound loss in my own abilities, allowed me to be resilient enough to make a change. And again, that same resilience has served me when I realized that practicing anesthesiology and raising a special needs child, when my husband, when we first decided to adopt children, said, he definitely didn't have the bandwidth for a special needs child, and we didn't know she was special needs when we adopted her. But this is, it became clear that she was on the autism spectrum with a severe high support needs bent to it by the time she was 3 years old. And so, I knew that I would need to really step up my game as a more primary caregiver for her and parent. And so, and that wouldn't work in the kind of career that I was developing as an anesthesiologist. So again, that resilience has allowed me to shift and grow and move again toward business and actually take that time to really find out what in business would give me passion. The most noteworthy event that I witnessed professionally in history was the most recent COVID-19 pandemic. And I made the decision to take a job with North Star Anesthesia in 2020. And as it so happened, during the time that I was transitioning from my previous contract, which was at a hospital in Oklahoma, to working for North Star, also in a different hospital system in Oklahoma, the pandemic hit. And so right before I took this role as a medical director of an anesthesia group, I I was faced with becoming an essential worker. I was faced with not knowing whether or not I would live or die through this pandemic. But, and in the 5 weeks between the time I left my previous contract and the time that I started my job with North Star Anesthesia, I had to create a trust for my children, who were 18 months and 2 months old at the time that the pandemic hit. I had to increase the amount of life insurance that I carried and disability insurance that I carried, because I didn't know if I was going to be able to provide for my family if something should happen to me. And that was also the same year that I actually had that freak accident spinal cord injury when I was working out at the gym after they reopened during the pandemic, and I never missed a day of work. It was an amazing experience. It stretched me as a leader. It gave me confidence that I could manage a group of people during a crisis in a way that was generative and kind and supportive, and the servant type of leadership that I think that I have, I honed during that period of time. I also saw some terrible, terrible tragedies. The one tragedy that sticks out in my mind the most was a pregnant woman who obviously was COVID positive, had come into the hospital with a cough to the OB triage before her full-term date, before her due date. She was not in labor. She was just feeling sick. And she tested negative for COVID at the time, and they sent her back home. And within, I think, 48 hours, she was brought back to the hospital in extremis, and she died. The baby died, and she left behind 5 children and a husband. And those were the things that I saw that, you see a lot of harsh things that happen in life, but I think in the hospital setting during a pandemic, you see things that make you really wonder if it's all worth it. But it was a short period of time, and our country came through it pretty well, considering. And but again, I did not miss one day of work during that 3-year period of time. How have I benefited from Marquis Who's Who? I think the cachet of Marquis Who's Who has inspired me to really work on my own personal brand, and to develop an internet presence, and to really be to have a source or sort of an internet presence where I can be found, because I do think the exposure that Marquis Who's Who can give me is great. But if I'm not ready to receive that exposure, then I've wasted this opportunity. Being a Marquis listee feels like an honor to me. It feels really like a door is opening for me, as I am actually trying to re-emerge as a business professional rather than just a practicing anesthesiologist. And so it really is exciting.